The morning sunlight filtered through the restaurant windows at Giovanni's, casting long shadows across our family's usual Sunday brunch table. I sat quietly, cutting my pancakes while my brother Marcus gestured wildly with his fork, launching into his familiar routine about my supposed failures and his superior business acumen. "I'm telling you, Amy, that coffee shop is wasted on you," Marcus declared, his voice carrying across the dining room. "You're just an employee there. When are you going to admit you're not cut out for business ownership?" Mom nodded approvingly from across the table, dabbing her lips with her napkin. "Marcus has the MBA, sweetheart. He understands these things better than you do." My father remained focused on his Eggs Benedict, occasionally grunting agreement when Marcus made particularly emphatic points about market positioning and profit optimization. This conversation had become as routine as our Sunday brunches themselves over the past 8 months. "The location is prime real estate," Marcus continued, warming to his favorite topic. "Corner unit, high foot traffic, established customer base. But you're just working there like an employee. It's embarrassing for the family." I sipped my orange juice and let him talk. Marcus had been building toward this moment for months. Ever since he graduated with his business degree and moved back home, he'd walk past Bean there, done that every few days, peering through the windows, taking photos of the customer lines, making notes on his phone about what he called optimization opportunities. "Your sister works very hard at that coffee shop," Mom said, though her tone suggested she agreed with Marcus about the fundamental problem. "But Marcus is right about the business side. You've always been more of a helper type, Amy, not a leader." The familiar sting of dismissal washed over me, but I'd learned to let it pass through rather than fight it. I was 28 years old, and this family dynamic had crystallized around the time I turned Marcus, the golden child, with his academic achievements and confident proclamations. Amy, the quiet daughter who worked with her hands and kept her head down. "I've been researching the financials," Marcus announced, pulling out his phone. "The strip mall that coffee shop sits in, the whole thing is probably worth $2 million, maybe more. And that corner unit has to be pulling in $15,000 to $20,000 a month in revenue during peak season." Dad looked up from his plate for the first time. "That much, easily, maybe more. Amy probably doesn't even realize what she's sitting on." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes bright with entrepreneurial enthusiasm. "The owner is probably some investment group that doesn't understand local market dynamics. Amy, you should introduce me to whoever runs that place. I could negotiate a better lease, maybe even work out a purchase agreement." I set down my fork and looked at my brother. "I don't think the owner is interested in selling. You don't know that. You're not thinking like a businessman," Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Everything is for sale at the right price. The key is understanding leverage and market positioning." Our server approached with the coffee pot, topping off cups around the table. The restaurant hummed with a quiet Sunday morning energy of families lingering over breakfast. The soft clink of silverware and murmured conversations, creating a peaceful backdrop to our increasingly tense discussion. "Marcus has a point, honey," Mom said gently. "You've been working there for what, 2 years now? If you're not moving up to management or ownership, maybe it's time to consider other opportunities." "I like working there, but you're limiting yourself," Dad interjected, finally joining the conversation fully. "Your brother sees the bigger picture. That coffee shop could be a real investment opportunity for our family." Marcus nodded eagerly. "Exactly. Family businesses stay in the family. It's about legacy, about building something together." He leaned across the table toward me. "Amy, I want to help you. We could be partners. I handle the business side. You handle the day-to-day operations. It's perfect." The presumption in his voice was breathtaking, but not surprising. Marcus had always possessed an absolute confidence in his right to claim whatever caught his interest. In high school, it was my friends who suddenly became his friends. In college, it was the internship I'd applied for that somehow became his internship after a phone call from Dad. Now it was my workplace, which he decided should rightfully be his business venture. "The owner might not be interested in taking on partners," I said carefully. "You don't ask, you don't get." Marcus pulled up something on his phone. "I've been studying the foot traffic patterns, and I've identified at least 6 optimization strategies that could increase revenue by 30% within the first quarter. He showed me a detailed spreadsheet he'd created, complete with projected earnings and expansion timelines. The amount of research he'd done was impressive, even if his fundamental assumptions were completely wrong. "This is what I'm talking about," Mom said proudly. "Marcus thinks strategically. He sees opportunities." "And Amy," Marcus continued, his tone becoming more serious, "I need you to understand something. This isn't just about the coffee shop. It's about your future. You're 28 years old, working an hourly job, living in that tiny apartment. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years?" The question hung in the air. It was the same question he'd been asking in various forms for months, each time with a slightly more concerned, slightly more condescending tone. "I'm doing fine," I said. "Fine isn't enough." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Look, I've been patient. I've been supportive. But watching you waste your potential at that coffee shop while the real opportunity sits right there untapped, it's frustrating for all of us." Dad nodded slowly. "Your brother is trying to help you build something real, Amy. Something substantial." The weight of their combined expectation pressed down on me. This was how family interventions began in our household, with Marcus identifying a problem, Dad providing gravitas, and Mom offering gentle but firm support for whatever solution Marcus had devised. "I've already drafted a business proposal," Marcus announced, pulling a folder from his messenger bag. "Revenue projections, market analysis, competitive positioning, the works. All we need is an introduction to the current owner." He slid the folder across the table to me. The cover page read, "Been there, done that. Strategic Acquisition and Optimization Plan by Marcus Chin, MBA." He'd even included a professional headshot of himself in the corner. "Marcus spent all weekend on this," Mom said admiringly. "He's really thought through every angle." I opened the folder and scanned the first few pages. His research was thorough, his projections were ambitious, and his confidence was absolute. He'd identified the coffee shop's peak hours, calculated average transaction values, researched local commercial real estate prices, and developed what he called a customer experience enhancement strategy. "The current owner is clearly leaving money on the table," Marcus explained as I read. "Look at page 4. They could add a lunch menu, extend evening hours, maybe even license additional locations, but they're playing it safe, thinking small." His analysis wasn't wrong about the potential. Been there, done that could certainly accommodate the improvement she'd outlined. The question was whether he understood who would be making those decisions. "So," Marcus prompted, "can you set up a meeting? Maybe this afternoon. I'm ready to make a serious offer." I closed the folder and looked around the table at my family, 3 faces looking back at me with expectation, confidence, and barely contained excitement about Marcus' latest entrepreneurial venture. "I don't think the owner takes meetings on Sundays," I said. "Tomorrow then. First thing Monday morning." Marcus was already pulling out his phone calendar. "Actually, you know what? Let's just stop by after brunch. Introduce me informally. Let me get a feel for their personality and negotiation style." "Marcus, I don't think, Amy." His voice sharpened. "I need you to stop making excuses and start thinking like a team player here. This is a family opportunity. We're talking about real money, real growth, real success." The restaurant around us continued its peaceful Sunday rhythm. But our table had developed the tense energy that preceded Marcus' more dramatic moments. I could see him building towards something, gathering the righteous indignation that had always been his most effective tool for getting his way. "Your brother is offering to include you in something significant," Mom said quietly. "Most people would be grateful for that kind of opportunity." "I am grateful," I said. "I just think there might be some complications you're not considering, such as—" Marcus leaned forward, his MBA training evident in the way he prepared to systematically address my objections. "The current ownership structure might be more complex than you think. Ownership structures can be navigated. That's what lawyers are for," Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "The real question is whether you're going to help your family succeed or continue making excuses." The conversation had reached the familiar inflection point where Marcus would begin applying pressure in earnest. I'd watched this pattern play out countless times over the years with friends, girlfriends, business opportunities, even family vacations. Marcus identified what he wanted, developed a plan for obtaining it, and then systematically removed obstacles until he achieved his goal. I'm not making excuses, I said carefully. I'm trying to explain that the situation might not be as straightforward as you think. Everything is straightforward if you approach it correctly. Marcus' voice carried the confident tone that had impressed his business school professors. The current owner has an asset. We have capital and expertise. It's a simple value exchange. Dad set down his coffee cup. Amy, your brother is trying to help you move up in the world. The least you can do is facilitate an introduction. The pressure was mounting in the familiar way. The three of them unified in their certainty that Marcus' plan was both brilliant and inevitable. I could feel the conversation approaching the point where my continued resistance would be interpreted as selfishness or fear of success. The owner is very private, I said. They don't usually meet with people they don't know. Then it's a good thing they know you. Marcus smiled. You can vouch for me. Explain that I'm serious and well qualified. Family recommendation carries weight in business relationships. Our server returned to clear plates and refill coffee cups. The brief interruption gave me a moment to consider my options, though none of them seemed particularly appealing. I could continue making excuses until Marcus became frustrated enough to try contacting the owner directly. I could refuse outright and endure weeks of family pressure about my lack of ambition and team spirit. Or I could let this play out in the way that would ultimately provide the clearest resolution. All right, I said. Finally, we can stop by after brunch. Marcus' face lit up with triumph. Perfect. This is going to be great, Amy. Sometimes you need someone with business training to help you see opportunities clearly. Mom reached across and squeezed my hand. This is wonderful, sweetheart. Marcus is going to help you build something real. The rest of brunch passed quickly with Marcus outlining his vision for transforming Bean There, done that into what he called a community hub with profit optimization. He'd already identified potential suppliers, researched equipment upgrades, and developed marketing strategies for attracting new customer segments. His enthusiasm was infectious in the way that Marcus' enthusiasms always were. By the time we paid the bill and headed toward the parking lot, even Dad was offering suggestions about accounting systems and business insurance options. We drove the 6 blocks to the strip mall in Marcus' car with Mom and Dad following behind in their sedan. The Sunday afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, and the usual weekend crowd filled most of the spaces outside the anchor businesses. Bean There, done that occupied the corner unit with large windows facing both the parking lot and the side street. Through the glass, I could see the familiar afternoon scene, customers reading newspapers at small tables, a line of people waiting to order, the warm lighting that made everything feel cozy and inviting. Look at that line, Marcus said as we got out of the car. Even on Sunday afternoon, the volume potential here is incredible. He walked toward the entrance with the confident stride of someone who'd already decided how this conversation would end. Mom and Dad flanked him like an entourage, their faces bright with anticipation about Marcus' latest venture. I followed behind, my stomach tight with the knowledge that this was about to become complicated in ways my family couldn't begin to imagine. The afternoon was about to take a very different turn than any of them expected. Marcus pushed open the door to Bean There, done that with the air of someone inspecting his future property. The familiar chime announced our arrival, and I saw several regular customers look up from their tables and wave. The barista behind the counter, Jenny, caught my eye and nodded toward the back office with a questioning look. Busy place, Dad observed, scanning the crowded tables and steady stream of customers. Exactly what I expected, Marcus said, pulling out his phone to make notes. High turnover, consistent foot traffic, strong local customer base. The fundamentals are solid. He walked to the counter like he owned the place, studying the menu board and pricing structure with obvious calculation. Jenny watched him with the polite weariness she reserved for customers who seemed likely to cause problems. Can I help you? She asked. We're here to speak with the owner, Marcus announced, about business opportunities. Jenny glanced at me, then back at Marcus. The owner doesn't usually take meetings without appointments. I'm Marcus Chin, he said as if his name should carry weight. This is my sister Amy. She works here. I'm sure the owner will want to discuss my proposal. The confidence in his voice was absolute. Marcus had never met a door that wouldn't open for him, never encountered an authority figure who wouldn't eventually be impressed by his credentials and enthusiasm. Let me check, Jenny said diplomatically. She disappeared into the back office, leaving Marcus to continue his inspection of the premises. He walked around the seating area like a real estate appraiser, noting table layouts and customer flow patterns. The space utilization could be optimized, he told Mom and Dad. Maybe 20% more seating capacity with better furniture arrangement. You have such a good eye for these things, Mom said proudly. I stood near the counter, watching regular customers enjoy their Sunday afternoon coffee while my family planned their future business venture. Mrs. Patterson sat in her usual corner spot with her crossword puzzle. The college students occupied the big table by the window with their laptops and textbooks. The young mother with twin toddlers had claimed the table near the restroom as always. These people had become part of my daily routine over the past 2 years. I knew their orders, their schedules, their preferences for seating and conversation. They'd created a community here, and Marcus saw them as data points in a revenue optimization spreadsheet. Jenny returned from the back office with a slight smile. The owner will see you now, she said. Right through that door. Marcus straightened his tie and picked up his folder of business plans. This is it, Amy. Time to think big. We walked toward the back office as a group, Marcus leading with his MBA confidence, Mom and Dad flanking him with parental pride, and me trailing behind with growing certainty that this conversation was about to become memorable for all the wrong reasons. Marcus knocked on the office door, then pushed it open without waiting for a response. Good afternoon, he announced. I'm Marcus Chen, and I'm here to discuss acquiring this business. He strode into the small office with his hand extended, ready to begin negotiations. Mom and Dad followed, their faces bright with anticipation. I stepped into the doorway and watched Marcus freeze mid-stride as he processed what he was seeing. Behind the desk sat Patricia Williams, the strip mall property manager, reviewing rental agreements with her usual Sunday afternoon efficiency. She looked up at Marcus's outstretched hand with polite confusion. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Patricia said calmly. I'm not the business owner. I just handle property management for the landlord. Marcus's confident expression flickered as he tried to recalibrate. Oh, well, can you put us in touch with the owner? I have a serious acquisition proposal. The coffee shop owner. Patricia glanced at the papers on her desk. That would be Miss Chin. Chin. Marcus looked puzzled. That's our name. Is the owner Chinese? Maybe we're related somehow. Patricia looked directly at me standing in the doorway. Miss Amy Chin. She owns Been There, Done That through Chin Holdings LLC. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus turned to stare at me, his MBA folder still clutched in his hand. Mom and Dad looked between me and Patricia with expressions of complete bewilderment. I'm sorry, Mom said slowly. Did you say Amy owns the coffee shop? Yes, ma'am. For the past 2 years. And actually, Patricia continued, pulling out another folder. Miss Chin, your rent check bounced again this month. Not for the coffee shop. That one cleared fine. I'm talking about your brother's apartment on Elm Street. The one he's 3 months behind on. She handed me a notice that clearly listed Marcus Chin as the tenant in default. Marcus' face went through several color changes as he processed this information. Amy, what is she talking about? I own the coffee shop, I said quietly. And I own the strip mall, and apparently I'm your landlord. The business folder slipped from Marcus' hands and scattered across the floor, his carefully prepared acquisition proposal spreading across the office carpet like fallen leaves. That's impossible, he whispered. Patricia consulted her files with professional efficiency. Let's see. Chin Holdings owns this entire property. Miss Chin also holds the mortgage on the building, the business license for Been There, Done That, and according to my records, she's been covering her brother's rent shortfall for the past 3 months. She looked at Marcus directly. Your sister has been paying your bills, Mr. Chin. She asked me not to mention it to the family. Mom sank into the chair across from Patricia's desk. Amy, how is this possible? You work here. You're an employee. I work here because I own here. I like making coffee and talking to customers. I kept my voice steady. The business degree wasn't necessary for doing what I love. Dad found his voice, but the money. How did you? I started the coffee shop with money I saved working 2 jobs through college. The strip mall came later when the previous owner needed to sell quickly. I looked around the small office that had become the center of our family storm. I live simply because I like living simply, not because I'm struggling. Marcus was still standing in the middle of the room, his professional confidence completely shattered. But you never said, you let me think. You never asked what I owned. You only asked what you could take. Patricia cleared her throat diplomatically. Miss Chin, about your brother's lease. The 3-month grace period you requested is expiring next week. Do you want me to proceed with the standard eviction process, or will the account be brought current? The question hung in the air. Marcus looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between humiliation and desperate hope. I'll transfer money to cover his back rent, I said finally. But going forward, he pays his own way. Amy, Marcus started, but I held up my hand. The offer to discuss business partnerships is interesting, Marcus, but I think we should start with you paying rent on time before we move on to acquisition strategies. Mom was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. How much? How much is this all worth? Patricia glanced at me and I nodded. The strip mall appraised last year at $2.8 million. The coffee shop generates about $400,000 annually in gross revenue. Miss Chin also owns 2 other commercial properties in the downtown area. The numbers settled over my family like a heavy blanket. Dad sat down heavily in the remaining chair. You're a millionaire, he said quietly. I'm someone who worked hard and made good investments. I looked at each of them in turn. The same person I was this morning at brunch when you were explaining how I needed Marcus to help me succeed. Marcus finally found words. Why didn't you tell us? Because this is what happens when I tell you things. They become yours to manage, optimize, and improve. I gestured toward his scattered business proposal. I built something I love. You saw it as something to take. The office fell quiet except for the sounds of the coffee shop continuing to operate beyond the door, customers laughing, the espresso machine hissing, Jenny calling out orders, the life I'd built continuing as it always had. Patricia began gathering Marcus' papers from the floor. I'll give you folks some privacy to discuss family matters. Miss Chin, just let me know about the rent situation. She left us alone in the small office that had suddenly become the center of a completely reorganized family dynamic. Amy, Mom said softly. We had no idea. We thought you were just getting by. I'm getting by. I'm getting by very well. Marcus sank into Patricia's vacated chair. I feel like an idiot. You saw what you wanted to see. You always do. I sat on the edge of the desk. The question is, what happens now? Dad shook his head slowly. I don't understand how we missed this. You missed it because you decided who I was when I was 16, and you never updated your assessment. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Quiet Amy, who works with her hands and keeps her head down. That story was easier than asking what I was actually doing with my life. But the apartment, your car, Mom gestured vaguely. I like my apartment. I like my car. I don't need expensive things to prove I'm successful. I looked at Marcus. Unlike some people, I don't need other people to know how much money I have. Marcus winced. The business proposal was very thorough. Wrong in every fundamental assumption, but thorough. I picked up one of his scattered pages. Your market analysis was actually quite good. Really? Really? You're smart, Marcus. You always have been. But you're also arrogant, and that makes you miss important information. I handed him the page. Like the information that your sister isn't someone who needs rescuing. We sat in the small office while the sounds of Sunday afternoon continued around us. The college students were probably finishing their study session. Mrs. Patterson would be heading home soon. The mother with the twins would be ordering their usual afternoon hot chocolate. So what now? Dad asked finally. Now you know, and we figure out how to be a family with accurate information instead of comfortable assumptions. Marcus looked up from the business proposal page he'd been studying. Amy, I'm sorry. I really am. I thought I was helping. You thought you were taking. There's a difference. Yeah, there is. Mom reached across and took my hand. We're proud of you, sweetheart. We should have said that more often. You should have asked more questions. We should have done a lot of things differently, Dad admitted. I stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the strip mall parking lot. My strip mall, my investment, my success that had been invisible to my family because it didn't match their definition of achievement. Marcus, I said without turning around, your 3 months of back rent comes to $4,200. You can pay me back in monthly installments, no interest. But you pay me back. I will. I promise. And if you want to help with the coffee shop, you can start by working a few shifts and learning the business from the ground up. No shortcuts to management. I heard him gathering up the scattered papers of his business proposal. Would you really consider making me a partner eventually? I'd consider making someone who understood the business and respected what I've built a partner eventually. Whether that person turns out to be you depends on how much you're willing to learn and how much you're willing to change. When I turned back toward them, my family was looking at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Not dismissal, not condescension, not comfortable assumptions about my limitations. Respect. It had taken 28 years and a completely exploded family brunch, but we were finally seeing each other clearly. The afternoon sun was setting over the strip mall, casting long shadows across my property, my business, my success that had been hiding in plain sight all along. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was having Sunday dinner with my actual family instead of the characters they'd imagined me to.